It's the 21st show. I'm Brian Mackey. For the rest of the program today, we're going to pay a visit to the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield. We're going to be talking about 3 exhibits. One previewing the museum's 20th anniversary celebration, that's starting in earnest later this year. Another on a rare 21-star flag from when Illinois had just become the 21st state. And the third is on a special exhibit aimed at making Lincoln more accessible to people with low or no vision. And we'll begin there. The exhibit is called Lincoln, Sight, Sound, and Touch. It features replicas of some of the artifacts in the museum's collection, like a casting of Lincoln's face and hands made just after his death, and a leather briefcase he used while president. Those are common enough. What's innovative about this exhibit is that it also seeks to render two-dimensional objects in 3D. So there's a copy of the Gettysburg Address in Lincoln's own handwriting that's been made into a tactile experience. And posters of advertisements for Lincoln automobiles and a movie about Lincoln. I visited the museum on Tuesday afternoon this week. Our guide through the exhibits is the museum's director, Christina Shutt. Because this conversation's on tape, no calls, but you can let us know what you think by emailing talk@21stshow.org. That's talk@21stshow.org. Director Shutt, welcome back to the 21st Show.
Thanks for having me today.
So tell me, how did this exhibit come about?
Well, this exhibit really is an outgrowth of work we had been doing that frankly came from our visitors about how can we make our museum for all people? How can we make sure that people who are blind or who have disabilities in vision can experience Lincoln and experience our museum? And we had done a small kind of pop-up exhibit with the School for the Blind, I think last year. And so this year we really are expanding on this concept by making a touchable tactile exhibit in partnership with Tactile Images and in cooperation with the National Federation for the Blind.
The Americans with Disabilities Act has been law for well more than 30 years now. I'm sure this is not the first time someone has thought about accessibility in a museum exhibit. What has been the standard until now?
Well, I think the standard has been that people just often aren't thought of, that unless there's real intentionality within the museum field as a whole, it just doesn't happen. Our museum, as amazing and wonderful as it is a highly visual experience. And one of the things that I think has really shifted for us in the last couple of years is that we've really started to be more intentional about can everyone experience the museum? How do they experience it? In what ways? Whether that's visually, whether that's auditorial, how do we help people experience the museum in a meaningful way that meets them where they are? Doesn't ask them to change who they are, but helps to meet them where they are. And so this, along with our new digital app experience, which had accessibility at the forefront of trying to devise a augmented reality experience, right? But that's also accessible. And so these kind of things really are about undergrounding and undergirding a foundation for us that museums are and should be for all people.
So maybe we can pick an object or 2 or 3 in here and talk about it and talk about how the work has been done to make it more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Director's choice.
Oh, okay. It's tough for me. Maybe the Gettysburg Address. I think that's probably one of my favorites. So we get to hold the Gettysburg Address. I've seen it in person. We're really proud to be one of a very small number of institutions to have 5, in fact, in the world, to have the Gettysburg Address in Lincoln's own hand. And so when we were exploring what accessibility might mean for us in this, we thought, well, what would it be like if people could actually rub their hands over Lincoln's words? They could feel the texture of his letters as he writes them across the page. And so we started with that, but then the touch table also includes audio elements that help to talk about things like the Battle of Gettysburg. So to put some context around it for folks, they talk about the ceremony, the speech that Lincoln gave, why he was giving that speech. And so what's really cool about this is that, we've committed to make this a permanent installation installation, or a long-term installation, I should say, for us. And so when we bring out the Gettysburg Address on it, the anniversary every year, as we do in November, we'll also have this touch table to accompany it so that everyone can experience the Gettysburg Address for themselves.
So maybe in the spirit of the exhibit, I should describe, there's a large frame on the wall. It's got a photo of Lincoln with a picture of the document next to it, as well as a fountain pen and an inkwell and a box to hold the pen. And then there's a huge, I don't know what, 5 feet by 4 feet maybe, platform standing in front of us. It's got sort of a raised relief version of what's on the picture, as well as some buttons. There's Braille writing. Maybe you can talk us through some of what's here.
Yeah, and so the Braille writing includes things like Lincoln's handwriting. And so if I touch the button, then people will learn about Lincoln's handwriting style, and they'll hear audio of someone explaining Lincoln's handwriting. If I touch things like about the document, they'll learn about the Gettysburg document. And why is it that Lincoln was asked to give a short 2.5-minute speech to dedicate this national cemetery? And I think what's really neat about it is, as you mentioned, you get the relief of Lincoln's face. So if you were blind and you've never seen a photo of Lincoln's face, you can experience Lincoln's face with your hands for the first time. And again, my hope is that this will add more meaning and richness to the collection. It'll add more meaning for our visitors, and that kind of universal design approach. Because, while I am not blind, I can appreciate the fact that I can feel what Lincoln's beard would have felt like, or experience that he wore a bow tie often.
So there's buttons next to words, next to Braille writing at the bottom of this, and then on the actual physical sculpted object itself, there are little silver dots. What do those do?
So the dots, when you rub your hands over them, actually trigger part of that audio. So if I were to rub my hand over here.
Bow tie was stylish for the 1860s. It was also known as a cravat or stock.
So you get a little bit more context about what he's wearing. So it's not just that you're feeling what he's wearing, but we're also doing what good museums do. We're giving that historical context to help place him in his history.
How do you actually design an exhibit like, or I guess this is an artifact, or how do you characterize? How do you design something like this? Where do you put the buttons? How many are too many? How do you not overwhelm people?
Well, we relied on experts. So we actually had a company that they specialize in this work. And so they helped us to come up with the table. They put together mock-ups for us, as well as gave us some tips on best practices with other institutions and places that they've worked with in designing these kind of experiences.
So this is the Gettysburg Address. I see a stovepipe hat in here. There's some other objects, some of Lincoln in pop culture, vehicles, advertising. I don't know what else strikes your fancy.
Probably one of my other favorite items in here is Lincoln's briefcase. So Lincoln's briefcase, this is a replica that I'm touching, and his briefcase or his portfolio has his name on it. It's a leather briefcase, leather portfolio with his name emboldened on there in gold ink. And this is a replica of one that we actually have in our collection.
And it has his name on it.
And it has his name on it, just as it would have.
With a period at the end. I love how they did that.
It's letting you know he's dropping the mic, right? It's Abraham Lincoln dropped the mic, right? Lincoln actually had the briefcase, the portfolios made not only for himself, but for each of his cabinet members. And so every single one of them had one of these portfolios. But, when we can touch the portfolio, we can imagine ourselves as Lincoln carrying important documents of the day. Maybe he was carrying things like notes for the Emancipation Proclamation in here, or perhaps documents he was considering around war strategies and maps as he was deciding what to do with the Civil War. And so it's really neat to be able to think about Lincoln carrying these things, but also that we can touch that history. When I was a kid growing up, being able to touch history, being able to experience history in this way was so deeply meaningful for me as a student. It was something that I think helped me connect with history in a different way than reading about it in a textbook did. I remember on the first day of class in high school in history, how my teacher came in with a Revolutionary War axe. It was a real one that he collected. And I will say, I don't recommend people do this. It's not a good practice for artifacts. But one of the things he did was he came in and he chopped the book in half, our art history textbook, and he said, this is what you can do to your history textbook. Now get out a pen and paper, we're gonna write history together. But the idea of being able to touch history, to connect with history, that was all what that class was about. My professor, our history teacher, collected lots of historical artifacts, and he would bring out his collection when he was talking about important things in American history. And I think it allowed me as a student to connect with history in a totally different way, which maybe even inspired me to do this kind of work in the future. But it's pretty cool that you can come in to this exhibit and you can touch the history in this way.
And I know so much of the museum has a no-touch policy, right? There are even alarms on objects if people get, kids like to touch the uniforms and things like that, but no.
There are, and we still keep all of the historical artifacts behind glass so that people can't touch those. But I think this exhibition is one way in which we're exploring, well, if we can't touch the actual artifact, can we touch a 3D replica of it? Would this still allow people to connect in a meaningful way with history, even though, they can't touch the actual artifact?
Let me reintroduce our conversation. If you're just joining us, this is the 21st show. We're visiting the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum in Springfield, where a temporary exhibit aims to make the museum experience more accessible to people who are blind or have low vision. I taped this conversation earlier this week with the museum's director, Christina Shutt. The final artifact we talked about in this exhibit is the poster for the movie Young Mr. Lincoln, a 1939 biopic directed by John Ford and starring Henry Fonda as Lincoln. Let's listen to a scene from the film when Lincoln the lawyer is trying to talk an angry mob out of lynching his clients.
We've gone to a heap of trouble not to have at least one hanging.
Sure you have, Mac. And if these boys had more than one life, I'd say go ahead. Maybe a little hanging mightn't do 'em any harm. But the sort of hanging you boys would give 'em would be so permanent. Trouble is, when men start taking the law into their own hands, they're just zapped in all the confusion and fun to start hanging somebody who's not a murderer as somebody who is. And the next thing you know, they're hanging one another just for fun. Till it gets to a place a man can't pass a tree or look at a rope without feeling uneasy. We seem to lose our heads in times like this. We do things together that we'd be mighty ashamed to do by ourselves.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, you have the poster of young Mr. Lincoln. Of course, there's been tons of films about Lincoln, but on this touch table, on this relief, you can feel the poster. So it's a raised 3D relief of the poster. And again, if I were to touch over one of the dots, it would trigger things where maybe it gives you more portrayal in history and context about the portrayal of Lincoln in the film, who's been portrayed and talked about a lot in films, right? But this film, of course, is so iconic for so many people.
Yeah, he's wearing a green flannel shirt here.
Lincoln's attire, a green plaid shirt with rolled sleeves, signals his hard-working nature and accessibility.
So it goes beyond the sort of the app or the little thing you hold up to your ear that you would see in museums. The museums have had for a long time.
Absolutely. I think what's really cool about these table reliefs are that they're giving you more context, right? They're not just telling you that, well, it's a green plaid shirt, but what's something that we would tell you a little bit more if you asked questions about? Well, we would tell you that maybe that green plaid shirt talks about his humbleness, right? Because we think about plaid on the frontier, kind of home folkness, so to speak, of Lincoln that he's known for. You might learn as you put your hands over the relief about his early life and the different things that happened in his life that impacted him as an adult. So we're giving you more of the context that oftentimes if you were sighted, you would get by seeing, because you could see that and you could make the connections. But if you can't, giving that context, I think, adds another layer.
Have you gotten any feedback from people with low vision who've come through here, for example?
We have actually. We've gotten a number of just amazing feedback. One of the great pieces that people said is, how are you going to incorporate more Braille? How will you incorporate more textual or touching kinds of things in the exhibits? And so that's something we're actively thinking about and actively considering. So we've been incorporating more things like Braille, but also even more signage that will help trigger audio responses. So all of our labels now that we do for our exhibits in terms of our objects are now, we're not only doing, again, the sighted version, but we're also making sure that we're doing audio versions that people can use with their own devices, their own phones.
Well, it's come a long way from Bob Rogers' vision, I guess.
Yeah, Bob still loves the place, and I still love Bob, but I think museums have to be places that change and evolve, right? We're not the same people that we were 20 years ago. We know a lot more, and the technology has met us. When I started in this field, this kind of technology didn't necessarily always exist, right? Braille did, but being able to do audio and have so much audio, right, in an exhibit was not necessarily something that most museums were doing.
Yeah. Anything else I haven't asked you about this room, or should we go talk about the 21-star flag? We're going to have a group from the Jacksonville School for the Blind here Saturday, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I will say that is one of the really cool things that's come out of this. So as I mentioned before, we did a small exhibit with the Illinois School for the Blind in Jacksonville. And because of that, we've been incorporating more Braille, and they really helped us with that. And we're so grateful to them. And so one of the things that they're doing is on the first day of school for their students, they are bringing them here to this exhibit to experience the exhibit. And that's something I am super eager to get their feedback, not just because they're blind, but really because they're students. How do students think about museum exhibits today? How can we improve it and make it more relevant for them?
The exhibit is called Lincoln, Sight, Sound, and Touch. Here's the thing. If you're interested in checking it out, you don't have much time. It's only set to run through this Sunday, August 24th. That said, there is always more to see at the Lincoln Presidential Museum in Springfield, and we'll talk about some of that when we return from a short break. This is the 21st Show. Stay with us.
Support for the 21st Show comes from listeners like you and the Des Moines Arts Center, located in Iowa's capital city, featuring works by regional, national, and international artists of the 20th and 21st centuries. Details are at DesMoinesArtsCenter.org.
It's the 21st Show. I'm Brian Mackey. Let's return now to the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. Actually, I taped this part of the show earlier this week on Tuesday afternoon, so no calls. But you can always get in touch by email. talk@21stshow.org is our address. talk@21stshow.org. On the way to the next part of our conversation, Museum Director Christina Shutt and I were walking across the rotunda of the museum, and I took the opportunity to ask her whether the Trump administration's push to have American museums focus only on the good parts of American history, if that's what you want to call it. I asked her if that had affected what they are doing here in Springfield.
Thankfully, no.
National parks.
Yeah, we because we're underneath the state, and because thankfully we have an 11-member board that's all into teaching all history. We haven't faced that.
I don't know if there are any particular grants or anything.
Well, we do have a federal grant, and we've finally got word the other day that they are going to continue to award our grant because of all the kind of courts and stuff like that saying you have to give folks their money. And that actually is for our new exhibit, Citizen City, which is all about teaching the importance of citizenship and democracy. So super relevant, and teaching people how to be good neighbors. So super relevant.
Yeah.
But that was a $250,000 matching federal grant.
Okay. When's that?
We're supposed to, the design phase is done finally, and so it'll go out to bid this fall. And hopefully install. Our goal is to install and it be open by Lincoln's birthday. Fingers crossed on that one, but
Okay.
From there, we entered the lobby of the Ghosts of the Library exhibit, and There is a small display case there that has artifacts from when the museum first opened 20 years ago. There's going to be a bigger exhibit coming later this year, as well as a coffee table book co-written by Shutt and one of the top museum officials. More on that in a moment. But I began by asking her just to describe what we were looking at.
Okay, so where are we? And maybe you can just talk us through what we're looking at.
So we're standing in the Ghost of the Library kind of queue area, as we call it. It's really a area that we have dedicated to telling untold stories, or stories that maybe people aren't as familiar with. And so traditionally in this area, we actually have community stories featured. But we thought, in honor of the museum's 20th anniversary as an institution, what a great opportunity to talk about something some people may remember, but not everyone. And let's share artifacts that really highlight, again, from the community, but artifacts that highlight the museum's 20th anniversary opening.
So what are we looking at here? I see a shovel, I see a construction hat, maybe a architectural model.
Yeah, so things like the shovel are from the groundbreaking for actually Union Station. So our building next door is part of our overall campus, as well as a photo that shows people breaking into the ground, kind of that ceremonial groundbreaking day for the museum. We also have things like a hard hat that they actually gave to a number of the staff as a way to kind of get people excited about the opening and the building of the museum. There's a diorama where people can see a small model of what our plaza looks like. So that iconic image of a log cabin across from a 1/11th size of the White House. You'll see that, as well as a number of other pieces of memorabilia, like a ticket to the program that they had, which of course had President George W. Bush, sorry. I always have to do it like Bush 41 and Bush 43. So Bush 43, but had President Bush and then Senator Barack Obama as the folks dedicating the museum.
I did cover, I was an intern at the State Journal-Register when the museum opened, and I covered some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, but I got out of having to sit through the presidential visit, which is kind of a nightmare for the press. I did have that broom, though. I'm trying to remember what the occasion for that was. I think they gave those out in the press room or something.
Yeah, they gave out brooms. They gave it all sorts of like really interesting tchotchkes. There was even these we have on display, one of the like little top hats, but like the really oversized top hat that looks sort of comical and cute, as well as something that I actually had never seen before, which was the very first ticket that we gave to someone who visited the museum, and our former employee actually signed a letter saying this was the very first ticket issued, and this gentleman had it framed and hung it in his house. So it's kind of neat to see some of these artifacts, and again, to think about what an impact we've had on Central Illinois, but also what an impact we've had on presidential libraries all around the country.
Briefly, what are so this is the start of the 20th anniversary. What else is in store?
This is the start of the 20th anniversary, absolutely. And so we've got a brand new retrospective Lincoln exhibit that will be coming in September that's all focused on telling the Lincoln story in a bold new way, as well as a brand new book that I've co-authored along with Ian Hunt that will be coming out and be released by Rizzoli in September of this year. That's actually available at all major booksellers for pre-orders now. I'm just saying, in case you're
no,
looking for
it's a good plug. Good plug. We'll come back and talk about that. So, yeah.
From there, Director Shutt and I walked over to, if I'm being honest, the thing I was most excited to see. Before we get to that, let me remind listeners this is the 21st show. I'm Brian Mackey, and we're listening to a conversation I recorded earlier this week on Tuesday afternoon at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. Our guest for this part of the show is Christina Shutt, the museum's director. And for this last part of our conversation, we're going to be talking about one of the museum's recent acquisitions, an ultra-rare 21-star flag. Illinois is, of course, the 21st state. That's one of the reasons we are called the 21st show. And Illinois wasn't the last state in the Union for long. Maine and I believe Alabama joined a year or two later. So there was a very short window of time when the Stars and Stripes could have 21 stars, and this flag is from that period.
Well, we're standing outside of our Treasures Gallery, just outside of Journey 2, so the end of the Lincoln Museum journey. And actually, what we're looking at is a 1818 flag showing Illinois as on the flag. So it's one of the rare flags that exists that actually shows Illinois as one of the stars on the flag.
And only Illinois is the final star, right?
Illinois is the final star, right? It is the final star. It's this flag was created shortly after Illinois became a state, and so that, of course, that period only lasts for about 2 years before there's a new state. And so that's part of the reason this makes it a really rare flag. In addition, unlike flags today, where we start with the red as the top stripe on our 13 stripes for the American colonies, this flag actually starts with a white stripe, which would have been maybe typical at the time. There wasn't quite the regulation that we have today about, the U.S. flag.
Yeah, and I understand. I mean, you didn't have every government building necessarily, every home flying a flag the way you do today. These are more rare objects, yeah?
They are. Well, the size it suggests that it might have been flown over a battleship or someplace of prominence just because it's so large. But people did wear American flags and think about them in all sorts of different ways. We have very small American flags as well as large ones like this. But again, it's what makes this show unique is that it's been preserved for so many years. Again, to be able to find a flag like this and to find one that has been preserved to somewhat, and then of course we did additional conservation work on it as well, just makes it all that more remarkable.
So it almost looks square, and I understand that maybe that was the shape, maybe it's just kind of tattered away at the far end.
It's a little tattered at the far end. It is, I believe, like 6.5 feet by, trying to think the other measurement. I'm not, 7 or so sounds about right, yeah. Terrible with, that's why they don't let me hang things here. I got to watch from the sidelines as they hug the flag. But I think what's so remarkable is even though it's tattered, it still stands. And so for me, I think about, well, what are those values, the things that we say are important as Americans that identify us as Americans? Are those things do they still stand, right? Do they still stand today? Do they still have relevance today? And so that's one of the things that I think about when I look at a flag like that and think about all of the stories that flag has seen, all of the things that it has been through in its many-yeared history.
And of course, we're the 21st show, named in part for the 21st state. Yeah. Talk about the significance, because it was a very short time that this was the national flag, right? We're adding states at a pretty rapid clip.
Yeah, they are. So we get a new state. We actually get 2 new states in about 2 years after this flag is created. And after Illinois becomes a state. And so this flag, and so one of the things about this flag that's kind of different, again, is it has this grand luminary pattern in the sort of field of stars. And so the grand luminary was a star shape. So it's stars made out of a star made out of stars, I guess would be the way to say it. And so again, that's another thing that makes this flag unique in the way that we think about flags today. It's a cotton flag. So again, we think about all the things that flags are made out of today, right? Nylon off of them because we don't want it to tatter in the wind. But this one was made out of cotton, which again would be very typical of the time.
I guess my last question, there's 21 stars. As you said, it's a star shape. There's 1 star in the middle. Is that Delaware or Illinois in your view?
I mean, I would like to believe it's Illinois. Because
that is the correct answer.
Right? Because we're in the center of it all, right? We're in the center of the country. We're the center of it all. And so, of course, we should be the center of our own flag. But again, it's such a cool piece of American history, especially as we think about America 250 and all of the many things that have happened in 250 years of American history that happened before with indigenous folks on this land, but then also happened once the United States took control of the land. And so it's pretty remarkable to think about all the stories that have been through there and how we've been shaped and are continuing to be shaped by those things.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me today.
Christina Shutt is the director of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. We taped this conversation earlier this week. Quick recap. The 21-star flag is on display for the time being. I don't know if there's actually a set timeline on that. There is a small exhibit showcasing some artifacts from the museum's opening 20 years ago. And the exhibit for people with low vision or blindness, it's called Lincoln Sight, Sound, and Touch. That is only open through this Sunday, August 24th. So don't wait if you want to feel that one, not see it, but feel it. That is all, again, happening at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield. That is all the time we have for our program today and this week. Coming up on Monday, my colleague Emily Hayes, education reporter at Illinois Public Media, will be interviewing the new chancellor of the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, the state's flagship public university. It's the first day of school for the students. We'll be airing an interview with the new chancellor on that day. Plus, we'll have a conversation on the end of late-night television seeming to be looming on the horizon with an Illinois scholar who has studied the early days of late-night television. We'll also pay visits next week to the Farm Progress Show. We're planning to bring you a conversation with Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. Also, why are electric rates so high for certain central Illinois customers? If you're experiencing problems with your electric bill, skyrocketing electric bills, we'd love to hear about what you have seen out there. Please let us know by emailing us. talk@21stshow.org is our address. talk@21stshow.org. You can find that address and every other way to contact us on our website, 21stshow.org. We've also got our voicemail line there. You can call that 24/7 and leave a message. We sometimes play those voicemails on air. You can also find out on our website how to join our texting group. You know, we call it public radio because we put it together with you, members of the public, and we love sharing your comments and questions on the show. You can join our texting group by sending the word TALK, T-A-L-K, and the number is 217-803-0730. Again, you send the word TALK to 217-803-0730. Again, information about that is on our website, 21stshow.org. We've got our past programs there. You can listen to our recent interviews with some of the U.S. Senate candidates seeking to succeed Dick Durbin there. We spoke with Congresswoman Robin Kelly this week, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton last week. We're planning to bring you conversations with other candidates in the future. That's all on our website, 21stshow.org. You can also find us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as now YouTube. But for that one, you have to search for Illinois Public Media. The 21st Show is produced by Christine Hatfield, Harrison Malkin, and Jose Zepeda. Layli Nazarova is an associate producer, and our digital producer is Kulsum Khan. Technical direction and engineering comes from Jason Croft and Steve Mork. Reginald Hardwick is our news director. Thank you to the band Public Access for our theme music. The 21st Show is a production of Illinois Public Media. I'm Brian Mackey. Thanks for listening. We'll talk with you again on Monday.